Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Morgan James book launch. My name's Jim Howard. I'm the publisher for Morgan James, and today I'm really excited. We've got a very inspiring, incredible author for you to meet. And today we're talking with Matthew Turner. And Matthew is the author of Beyond the Pale, a fable about escaping the hustle and finding yourself. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Jim, hello. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to share this book and get it out into the world.
We are as well. This is such an amazing book. And the coolest part is it's not just this compelling story, but you can really put yourself in the position of the main character and the circumstances and kind of see how that applies to your life. And I think it's so well put together. Can you tell us a little bit about, the premise of Beyond the Pale, the book, and who's it written for?
Sure. Well, here it is in all its glory. You guys did an incredible job on the book cover. I've had
Oh,
so many
beautiful.
amazing compliments, and I still take huge pride every time I pick it up because it's so vibrant and it just feels fantastic. And yes, Beyond the Pale, as you mentioned earlier, it's a fable. So I've always wanted to bring my two passions of writing both fiction and nonfiction together. And it was a few years ago now I had the idea of what eventually became Beyond the Pale,
Mm.
a fable that is very much a fictional tale that surrounds the lead character, Ferdinand Foy, who is, by all accounts, an extremely successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur, the kind of entrepreneur many of us aspire to be like. At least we feel like we should aspire to be like him because on the outside looking, he has it all. He has
Mhm.
everything. But as we learn quite early on in the book, Ferdinand isn't quite as happy as he assumed he was. He wasn't pursuing his dreams in a way that he assumed he was. And he doesn't feel as successful as he assumed he should. And that's really where the non-fiction elements come in, because he starts a journey there where he meets real world business owners, authors, speakers, thought leaders, people who have personally inspired me on my own journey in recent years. And they were kind enough to not only sit down and be interviewed by me, but allow me to bring their actual selves into the book. So it's a fictional tale, but it's set in the real world and it features these real world entrepreneurs, people like Kamal Ravikant and AJ Leon and Virginia Callas-Salis and Hollis Carter, just to name a few, Jordan Harbinger too, and Saul Orwell, and people who just inspired me. And I interviewed them asking them, like, if you were to meet Ferdinand, a guy like this who seems to have it all, but when you dig a little bit below the surface, he is quite shallow. He is someone who is living quite a few masks. He's turning up trying to be a certain person to certain situations, certain people, wearing different hats every day. And he talks a good game. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you realize he's just saying a lot of things that mean much to do with nothing. And that's Beyond the Pale. It follows Ferdinand, this successful entrepreneur who's very much caught up inside the hustle. It follows Ferdinand, the successful person we all aspire to be, but is just following the dreams and aspirations that society leads us to believe is success.
Mm.
It follows Ferdinand, a guy who seems to have it all figured out, but when he takes a step back to reflect, he realizes he has no idea what his dreams actually are. And he wants to be a billionaire. He wants to have this $1 billion business. He wants to be fill in blank, but he's never questioned why, what it actually means to him. So he goes, he ventures, he travels the world, meets incredible people, and bit by bit peels away one layer after another, goes down a rabbit hole of mindset and personal development and our relationship with others, our relationship with ourselves, our mind, our body, and our spirit, which plays a fundamental role in the back end of the book. And eventually, towards the end, he starts to not necessarily come up with the right answers, but starts to ask the right questions. And you asked earlier about who it is written for. Well, that is who it's written for. In some ways, it's written for all of us because we're all asking these broad questions, expecting to be given specific answers. And really, it's written to try and open people's eyes to just start thinking about, okay, what questions should I be asked? First and foremost, business owners, entrepreneurs, millennials, people who are very much caught up in today's online focused world, constantly connected, constantly comparing ourselves to others. And it's just asking you to take a step back, to think about the business you're building, the life you're leading. Are you asking the right questions? If so, can you go deeper? If not, what are those questions? And then strip away your own onion, strip away those layers so you can get to the gooey center, which where all the magic happens, just like Ferdinand has to in the book. And what I'm learning more and more is I wrote it for millennial entrepreneurs, but I'm learning more and more that people older and younger than that demographic are finding a lot of value from it and asking similar questions. And people who aren't necessarily business owners, I really thought it would just be for business owners. I was really surprised when I was giving it to friends and people I've connected with over the years who aren't business owners, they're executives or they're just employees or they've retired, and they're still saying this related, like this touched me. It forced me to ask these kind of questions. So I'm realizing more and more as I venture forward that this is a book that is just opening eyes, and that's lighting me up so much because that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, and I think why it touches on so many different types of people through different walks of life is that no matter what we're doing, right? And I've been an entrepreneur, business owner for 30 years, so I know and understand. But even when we get to that point that we're successful, we're doing things, it's working exactly as we thought it would. We oftentimes will allow ourselves to get caught up in the
Yeah.
business of the business and forget the whys of the business, or even if we're not business owners. But I think that what you're finding out is that we set out to be the best husband, the best mother, the best family, the best whatever it is, the best employee that we become, and we get caught up in that, and then we lose sight of the why we're doing it. And your book opens up everyone to question why. What is it? What is success? And is success what you initially thought it was? And did your vision of success change as you started after you started this journey that you're on? And I think those questions that Ferdinand leads to, and as I was sharing with you before we started, just allows us to put ourselves into his journey, his story, and align with it, so we can see ourselves in that and come to the understandings that we need, and beyond the pill doesn't so well.
Well, thank you very much. And you touched upon a couple of really great points there. I automatically think about Simon Sinek's start with why.
Mm.
And I think many people start with why. They start a business in particular, but in our personal development too, if we're wanting to become a better self, if we're wanting to lose weight, for instance, or get fit, when we start, we often do start with why. We have a vision, we have a dream ahead, we can see that destination in sight. So we start with why, but then we get consumed by everyday life and all the various different pieces to the puzzle, and we lose sight of why. And as the weeks and the months and the years go along, we just totally lose and become disconnected from that why. So this book hopefully encourages you to think about what that why was. Maybe you started with it, and when you take a step back, you realize you've drifted apart. And another big point you talked about there, we go for different chapters in life.
Mm.
You may start your business when you are in your young 20s, when you're single. And then you wake up and you're in your mid 30s, like I am now, and you've got a couple of kids and you've got a house and you feel a little older, you feel a little more tired. And you're like, well, is success the same to me today from when I first started? And that's not ever going to be the case. We go through these different chapters in life. It's impossible to have a concrete version of success which remains the same throughout life. We're going to go through these different chapters. So again, hopefully this just encourages you to take a step back, reflect on what life looks like now, how you're feeling, just recoup a little bit of that energy and those thoughts and those feelings, and just like, right, what is success for me right now? What is it going to be for me moving forward in that next chapter? And why am I doing all this?
Mm.
What's going to light me up? And sometimes we have to pivot. Sometimes we have to keep going. Sometimes we have to dig deeper. And sometimes we have to take a step back, draw a line in the sand, and start afresh.
I love that. Absolutely love it. Now, we as you've mentioned, and as it says in the subtitle, it is a fable. And this is one of my favorite types of books, right? I love to read fables. I love to read allegories, if you will. So, what inspired you to take this book into this direction and create this story centered around Ferdinand and introduce it as a fable?
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, I've long had this aspiration of bringing my fiction and my nonfiction worlds together one day. For quite a few years, I just had no idea what that would look like. And I was inspired by books like The Alchemist, but I just never quite understood how I would be able to do something like that. And I wish I had like an aha moment where I remember, Ferdinand just coming about, and I was like, okay, I know this character, I know this story, but it just crept up on me over a course of many months, and I just started to piece it together. But one of the big driving forces for me, my previous book, my nonfiction book, was called Success and Mistake, and part of it, I interviewed 163 entrepreneurs about failure and how they turned that into success. So as you can imagine, interviewing those people, it taught me a lot. And I met a lot of people who, or I consider further down the road than me, the kind of person who I'm aspiring to be like. And I would speak to them and I would get a bit of a snapshot for what life looked like yesterday for them
Mm.
during this mistake. And I was able to compare what life looked like today as they're more successful, more rounded. They understood what success meant to me, success meant to them. And I would often ask them about the books they would read because I'm a reader, I'm a writer, I'm very curious about this. And time again, I realized that these people further down the road, these people who I aspired to be like, who inspired me, they would read novels. They would read memoirs and autobiographies and biographies. They would read history and the sciences and philosophy and books like this. And I'd be like, but what about the typical nonfiction books out there, the how-to books, the business books, the books we see on social media and that fill these 10 books to read as an entrepreneur this year? And they would just time and time again say, well, I've read all those books, I've read those kind of books. And I realized once I've read 10 of them, I've kind of read all of them. And I found myself just reading a lot of these books for the sake of reading it. I was consuming for the sake of consuming, just trying to fill my mind. As I mentioned earlier, just asking these broad questions in the hope of getting specific answers. And I think that's what too many entrepreneurs do. They read these very business centric, very how to centric books in the hope they'll find a specific answer. And they're just filling their brain with information for the sake of it. Those books are fantastic when you have a specific question. So if you're looking to learn something specific, turn to a book and it will give you that specific answer. But if you're just turning to that book hoping that it will reveal something, it probably won't give you what you need. So I thought, wow, yeah. And I speak to these people who are at my level or further behind me, and I ask them, when was the last time you read a novel? They'll be like, at school. So I started to see a bit of a disconnect. The people further down the road are reading novels. They're reading the kind of books that the people at my level and behind me don't even consider. Why is that? So I asked those people caught up in the hustle, I asked those people at my level and behind me, why don't you read novels? Why don't you read philosophy? Why don't you read autobiographies? And often they would just be like, I don't have time. I feel guilty reading a novel because I feel like I should be reading to learn. I feel guilty binging on Netflix because I feel like I should be using that time learning about my business, working on my business. And these people further down the road, they often found their success when they turned their back on the hustle, when they started to create greater balance, when they started taking a less is more approach. And they're like, you know what, I don't need to learn all the time. Sometimes I can just read for the love of reading. Sometimes I can just go for a walk because life is for living. I can build a business on my terms rather than subscribing to a certain model and trying to fit into this square, to this circle, to this triangle. And that was a big eye opener for me. And I thought, if I could write a fable that focused on the toxicity of hustle culture and how, to some degree, we're all caught up inside it, especially those people my age, my generation. And I can provide a story that isn't only going to entertain like a novel and allow you to escape like a novel, but teach and enlighten in some way like a nonfiction book, then they're not going to feel as guilty reading it. They're going to allow themselves to read it because they're going to feel like they're going to get something from it. But as reading it, they do disconnect, they do escape, they do allow themselves to just take a step back and smell the roses and start to relate their life to Ferdinand, their character to Ferdinand's, their journey to the one Ferdinand goes on. And that's when they will hopefully be inspired to start questioning the questions they're asking in the hope of just getting these specific answers that do not exist. So that is why I wrote a fable, in the hope of enlightening and educating, but in a sneaky way through escapism and entertainment.
Yeah, I love it.
Little
Absolutely.
ninja tactics there is
You
what I
know,
was hoping.
but but it's so smart because that's the thing. When we read how-tos or business books or educational books, it's often to find that piece that we think we're missing or we need to move us forward. But oftentimes the portal of inspiration, the portal of creativity is the imagination, and the imagination gets fired up when you're allowed to read a story and see how that intertwines and follow that character on their journey and see how things unfold for them, and you start to fill in some gaps, which stirs the imagination and stirs the emotion and causes you to start finding some, maybe some new avenues that you didn't think about before.
Yeah, well, there's two things there. One, we have to remember the role storytelling plays
Mm,
in us as humans. It's literally built into our DNA. Like these things, these books that we base our lives around, they're relatively new
yeah,
to human existence.
sure.
Like a snap of the finger. For the vast majority of our place on the time on this earth, we would pass down information through face to face, through verbal. So we had to tell stories so that they would be easily remembered. Because if you just shared facts and figures, forgotten. So we shared stories to bring things to life, to inspire, to make people lean forward. And in the hope that they would pass it on to the next generation, to the next generation, next generation. So storytelling is something that we trust. It's a fantastic method for us to learn. And yeah, I feel like fables are an underused mechanism to do that. Like novels so often are a great form of disconnect, escapism, and entertainment, but they don't usually enlighten that much. There may be certain meanings and they ask you to certain questions, but a lot of the times we'll read a novel just to escape, just to be entertained. And we might relate to the character, but we don't necessarily learn anything specific.
Right.
The how-to books, they're just complete opposite. They're designed to teach, and they may have some stories in there, but again, they're not really rooted in stories. So a fable is a nice balance of those. And the other thing which I always bring it back to, imagine it's like your kid, and your kid is at school. You've got a 8-year-old child. I've got a son, he's 8. And I just imagine it like this. Imagine he went to school at 8 o'clock in the morning and he was at school all the way till 3. And he got home and then he did 3 hours of homework and he finished his homework and he just, rather than being a kid, rather than playing, rather than using his imagination, rather than just unwinding a little bit, he was just, I'm going to now spend the next 3 hours until bedtime just reading another book to learn. And he just did that day after day after day because he felt guilty that he wasn't learning, that he wasn't, filling his brain with the right kind of things. As a father, I'd feel worried. As a father, I'd be like, relax. You're allowed to enjoy life. You're allowed to disconnect. That's not to say I want you to spend 12 hours on a computer or binging in front of TV, but I want you to be a kid. Yet so many people, especially those with business owners, that is the life they lead. They wake up and they work, and they work and they work and they work. And they do it at the expense of their health and their diet and time with their family. And then when they do get a bit of time when they finish their to-do list, what do? They open a book, and it's a business book. And they're reading it because they feel they have to keep on learning, because they feel guilty of not spending time on their business. So they read one business book after another, and then they read some kind of documentary or a podcast or a YouTube channel. Everything is built around their business. Everything is built around learning, learning, learning. And it's not just one day. It's not just a 1 week. It's month after month after month. And it is exhausting. We wouldn't let our children live a life like that. We would be worried about them. Yet those are the lives that we lead, especially as business owners. And it is dangerous and it is toxic. And we deserve to have a little bit of fun. We deserve to have a little bit of us time. We deserve to be human. We deserve to play. We deserve to be. And that's what I hope this book allows people to, give themselves permission to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of touched on it there, but even in the subtitle, a fable about escaping the hustle and finding yourself. So what role does that hustle play in the message of the book?
So I always assumed I wasn't a part of a hustle because I've never been one of these people that glorified and kind of gravitated towards the 70-hour work weeks and the Gary Vee type of, hustle and grind, having a side hustle on top of a side hustle. I was never like that. I was like, I like to, relax a little bit. So I was like, I'm not really into hustle. But when I learned that my daughter Imogen was coming along, I realized I was going to have to make some huge changes. I was working too long. I was saying yes to too many things, and I was going to have to change my lifestyle. So it opened my eyes to the true nature of what I believe hustle to be. And we're locked on the notion that hustle is these 7-hour work weeks. And it's all these side hustles on top of side hustles. And that is a part of it, and it's a toxic part of it. But I believe the greater definition of hustle just surrounds our relentless connection to everything.
Mm.
Like, we are connected. I'm right now, if I wanted to, I could just click, be on Google, be on social media, and I'm getting a peek into other people's lives. I am constantly connected to my phone, and I find myself doing it all the time, checking email for no reason whatsoever, checking social media for no reason whatsoever, just constantly thinking about business for no reason whatsoever, just because I'm connected and I can. We used to have to leave work at the office because we needed to go to the office to do work. Well, that's not the case anymore. We are the office. We have access to the office at all times. So we're constantly connected. It's always on our mind. That's the hustle. The other part of the hustle is just our constant connection to everyone and everything. You think about, we often will turn to social media. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'll find myself scrolling mindlessly through Facebook or Instagram when I'm bored. And when I'm bored, I'm more susceptible to be a bit down, a bit self-doubt, a bit insecure, because if I wasn't feeling those things, I'd be more present in the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling bored and I'm feeling a bit fragile because I'm just a bit down. So I turn to social media. And what do I find on social media? People living these supposed happy lives. So I see an entrepreneur who seems to have more success than me. I see another guy who seems to have a better body than me. I see a girl who's got a greater smile than me, seems happier than me. So we get these little edited versions, little peeks into people's lives. We don't see what's really going on. We have no idea what they're really feeling. They're just showing us what they want to see, what they want us to see. But so we're just seeing the good, we're not seeing the bad. And we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, which forces us deeper into the hustle, forces us deeper into our own business. We don't feel like we can disconnect from our business because, well, if I want to have what he has, I've got to work a little bit harder. If I want to have a body that he has, I need to work a little bit harder. So it forces us to just be more connected, which forces us to be more connected, to be more connected. So it's just this vicious cycle. We're on a hamster wheel. And for me, that's the hustle. It's not whether you work 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours. There'll be people out there who only work 3 or 4 hours a day, but are still very much part of the hustle. To an extent, I think every single person, other than maybe the monks who are completely disconnected from society, we're all to an extent a part of a hustle. Some more so than others, but we are all to an extent a part of the hustle, regardless of whether we work 3 or 12 hours a day. And that was eye-opening for me because I assumed I wasn't, because I did stop work at a pretty decent time. I never thought working deep into the night was a badge of honor. But I did realize that I worked longer than I needed to. I did realize I kept saying yes far more often than I needed to. I did realize I was connected and constantly thinking and worrying about my business more than I needed to. I did realize I was checking email and social media and all these other things far, far, far too frequently. And I did realize that I was just constantly, at least on a subconscious level, comparing myself to other people and their situation. And it would just fuel my insecurity. And that right there is the hustle. And we talked earlier about losing sight of our why.
Mm.
And you asked me, like, the role hustle plays in all of this. Well, that's it. That's it. Because we start a business with a why in mind, and we get caught up in the hustle, and it disconnects us from us why. And as the months and the years go on, we just become a shell of not just who we used to be, but a shell of a human being, period. And by reconnecting to our why, it is empowers us to take a step and escape the hustle, which further empowers to reconnect to our why. And then we can start going into a more positive cycle where our why fuels our disconnect from the hustle, which allows us to reconnect further into our why, go a mile deep, stop scratching the surface and go a mile deep.
Mm.
So we escape a negative spiral, a negative hamster wheel of just being connected, leading to being connected, self-doubt, insecurity, and all this, to a more positive one of why, going deeper into our why, going deeper into our. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. I hope.
No, absolutely it does. I honestly think that there are probably some watching today who, along the way, have said, "Well, that's not me. I'm not in that hustle. That doesn't apply to me." And just as you discovered, and I think everyone watching this will discover when they read this book, in some way, you're going to connect with this message, and you're going to find out, wait a second, maybe that is a little bit me. Maybe I do need to take a break from certain things and come back and revisit why I did this in the first place. And Beyond the Pale does this so beautifully. And I challenge every one of you watching today to get a copy of this book and read it. Matthew has done a phenomenal job of bringing real life experiences and practical advice and folded it into this just incredible story that unwinds that as it does, you'll find yourself connected all along the way. So, Matthew, thank you so much for one, doing all the work that you've done with interviews and discovery and finding out where people are on their journeys and what makes them different, and even through failure to success, what they've learned along the way, and then bring that into this. And your passion for writing is evident because the book is so well done, the story is so well told, and I think this is a book for everyone. So thank you for taking the time to follow that dream and bringing those two worlds together and writing this incredible book.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and it has been my absolute pleasure. And I'm excited to see this enter the world now and have an impact.
Absolutely. So, Matthew, I know people are watching this today, and they're probably wanting to figure out how they can find out more. And maybe they've even got a copy of the book, or they're waiting to receive a copy of their book. What's the best way for them to connect with you to find out more about Beyond the Pale?
Well, the best place to go is beyondbook.co. So that's beyondbook.co. And there you will be met with this wonderful picture of the mountains at the top of the page. And it will give you everything you need to know on that site. There's a link to a free sample, so you can download a free sample to get a feel whether it's right for you. It's the first few chapters. I encourage people to do that because reading a book is an investment. So have a sample, see if it's right for you. And if it is, then there's all the links on there on how you can get it from places like Amazon and Google and Apple and Barnes and Noble and all of that good stuff, both ebook, paperback, and everything else. There's some more information on the book as well, a bit of a blurb, links to a Facebook group that takes what's discussed in the book to the next level in a more practical sense, and also links to my Facebook and Instagram where you can learn more about my journey, connect to me, communicate. I always love to chat shop, whether it's with a fellow writer or just an avid reader. So yeah, beyondbook.co, and I'll give you everything you need.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, First of all, I just want to say, everyone watching, you need to get a copy of the book and you need to connect with Matthew. This book will educate, it will inspire, it'll encourage you. And that's what we want. That's what we want from anything that we read. But as Matthew said, when you go through a book like this, you're not just learning, you're figuring out, you're applying, you're internalizing, and that's where the power is. So, Matthew, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see what happens as this book gets into many hands.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Great chatting with you, and thank you. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I've enjoyed writing it.
Awesome. And thank all of you for watching today. And we hope to see you on our next one. So until then, take care, guys.